The waves crash violently against jagged rocks, sending sprays of salty water into the cold night air. Along the coasts, where cliffs rise sharply and the wind screams endlessly, there are caves no one dares to enter after sunset. By day, they appear harmless, dark hollows at the waterline. By night, they awaken. Visitors report hearing screaming echoes that carry unnaturally far, whispers that grow louder when approached, and shadows that twist along the walls as if alive. Some say the caves remember pain. Others say the sea itself brings the voices of the lost inside. Those who enter feel watched. Those who linger feel touched by invisible hands. Some never emerge. Tonight, we journey to 20 haunted coastal caves where screaming sounds echo through the night, shadows linger along the walls, and the line between sea and nightmare disappears. If a scream erupted behind you, deep within a cave that seems alive, would you investigate, or turn away before the sound reaches your own ears? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe tonight, because the journey we are about to take leads into places that are not meant for the living. Coastal caves have always been places of mystery. Fishermen speak of voices carried by the tides. Sailors whisper of sailors who vanished near the cliffs, leaving nothing behind. At night, these caves seem alive. Water sloshes even when the tide is low. Shadows move along jagged rock walls. Screaming echoes from inside, chilling even the bravest. Visitors report feeling fingers brush past them, cold air that burns the skin, and footsteps following them even when the cave is empty. Some hear their own names whispered from the depths. Others see figures standing just beyond the reach of lantern light. Some explorers return terrified. Some never return at all. Some carry nightmares from the caves into the world outside. Before we step closer to the first cave, let me ask you this. If a shadow rose from the sea and whispered promises of untold secrets, would you listen, or flee while you still could? Take a deep breath, and let us descend into the most haunted coastal caves with screaming sounds. Blood Tide Cave lies at the base of jagged cliffs, carved by centuries of wind and sea. The walls are blackened, slick with moisture and mineral deposits, glinting faintly in the light that filters through the entrance. The air is damp and heavy, carrying the scent of salt and earth, a tang that lingers on skin and clothing. The cave mouth opens wide, yet the interior swallows light quickly, leaving deep shadows that seem to pulse with the rhythm of the tides. Visitors are often struck by the sound. Scream-like echoes resonate from deep within the cave, rising and falling in unpredictable waves. The noise is sharp and sudden, yet no figure or origin can be found. The sound bounces along the blackened walls, creating the impression of a space alive with the memory of cries, of voices trapped in stone and water. The floor of the cave is uneven, slick with wet stones and shallow pools. Water seeps from cracks above, dripping rhythmically, adding to the echoing symphony of sound. Footsteps disturb the reflections on the wet surface, rippling them across the walls and ceiling, yet the cave seems indifferent to human intrusion, carrying the echoes farther than ordinary space should allow. At night, the water inside the cave can appear to glow faintly red. The source is never visible, and the light is soft, almost imperceptible from a distance, yet unmistakable to those who linger. Reflections shimmer across the blackened walls and puddles, casting moving shadows that seem to reach toward visitors. The effect is disorienting, producing the impression that the cave itself is bleeding light, alive with some unseen force. Sound is layered and immersive. Drips from the ceiling, the slap of waves against submerged stones, and the repeated cries create a landscape of auditory tension. The cave absorbs ordinary noise and amplifies the unnatural. Voices and screams seem to come from different depths simultaneously, impossible to locate or trace. Travelers find themselves turning repeatedly, drawn deeper by sound yet wary of unseen dangers. The cave walls are textured and uneven, with crevices and fissures that seem to shift with perception. Shadows gather in recesses, forming shapes that suggest movement just beyond the edge of sight. The reflections on wet surfaces multiply these illusions, creating a constantly changing environment that feels alive and aware. Even small motions produce cascades of reflected light, adding to the sense of unpredictability. Visitors often experience a subtle pressure inside the cave. The air feels heavy against the chest, cold and dense, as though the cave itself presses down. Breathing becomes conscious, measured. The feeling intensifies as travelers venture deeper, particularly near pools where the red glow is strongest. The effect is physical and psychological, creating tension that accumulates with distance from the entrance. Time perception is altered in the cave. Minutes may stretch or vanish entirely. Travelers moving only a few feet report sensations of having traversed far more ground. Echoes repeat in patterns that do not match movement. Shadows seem to linger or advance independently. Visitors often exit with the impression that they have been inside much longer than they actually were. Explorers note that the red glow reacts subtly to movement. Stepping closer intensifies the reflection on the wet walls. Shadows lengthen in response. Water ripples without apparent disturbance. The cave responds, subtly, as though aware of presence, observing without form. Attempts to document the phenomenon are often thwarted. Cameras and audio equipment frequently fail. Images appear blurred or distorted, and recorded sound captures static and echoes beyond human interpretation. The cave seems to resist being measured or fully observed, maintaining a layer of mystery that cannot be penetrated by technology. The cave extends deep into the cliffs, with twisting passages that lead to near-total darkness. Travelers report the sensation of being followed by unseen presences, hearing footsteps or whispers that do not correspond to their own movement. The combination of echo, shadow, and reflective light produces an as though the cave itself is sentient. The visitors often leave with lasting impressions. The red water, the echoing screams, the chill in the air, and the shifting shadows combine to create a memory that persists beyond physical experience. The cave continues to resonate in thought and imagination. A reminder of a place where ordinary rules of space, sound, and perception do not fully apply. Blood Tide Cave endures as a site of quiet tension and immersive mystery. Its blackened walls, glowing water, and endlessly echoing cries create an environment where perception is stretched and ordinary expectation suspended. Travelers leave with the sense of having entered a space alive, shaped by sound, reflection, and memory. A cave that watches, responds, and persists long after the journey ends. At night, the red glow pulses softly in the pools, reflections shimmer on black walls. And the echoes of screams continue, rising and falling with the rhythm of the tides. Blood Tide Cave remains, a place where earth, water, and shadow converge to create a haunting, unforgettable experience, suspended between reality and perception, waiting for the next visitor to step into its depths. Ravina's Hollow sits at the edge of a dense forest where mist coils between gnarled trees and moonlight struggles to reach the ground. The path leading to the hollow is narrow, flanked by twisted trunks and thick undergrowth. And the air carries the faint metallic scent of damp earth. Travelers who approach after dusk notice an immediate change in atmosphere, a subtle heaviness that presses against the senses and slows movement. Shadows appear first. They move along walls, darting in shapes that resemble birds. Dark forms stretch across rock and wood, flitting from corner to corner in impossible patterns. The shapes are never fully defined, yet the impression of motion is constant. Observers report an uneasy sensation that the shadows are aware of their presence, tracking each step with silent intent. Eerie whispers accompany the shadows. They are soft, incomprehensible murmurs that drift through the air, seeming to come from all directions at once. The sound is neither constant nor predictable. A pause in movement may produce a sudden swell of murmuring, while advancing along a path can cause the whispers to echo faintly behind. The voices are not threatening in tone, yet they unsettle and heighten awareness, producing a feeling that the hollow itself is alive and listening. Physical sensations manifest as visitors move through the space. Travelers feel pressure on the shoulders as if hands brush against them, though no one is present. The touch is subtle, fleeting, yet undeniable, producing a quickening of breath and a heightened sense of alertness. Some report chills running along the spine or a weight pressing lightly against the chest, sensations that vanish when the area is closely examined. The hollow's geometry contributes to disorientation. Paths curve unexpectedly, and trees or boulders appear closer or farther than memory suggests. Shadows bend along surfaces, merging with natural features to create illusions of depth and form. Every step produces heightened attention to sound, light, and motion. The environment amplifies perception, making ordinary movements feel measured and deliberate. Screams erupt from the recesses of darkness, sudden and intense. They are brief yet piercing, echoing across rocks, trees, and narrow paths. The sound comes without discernible cause, striking fear and attention. It fades as quickly as it appears, leaving silence that feels heavier than before, reinforcing the sense that the hollow is observing and shaping the experience of those within. The combination of shadows, whispers, and disembodied touch produces a profound disorientation. Time feels altered, with minutes stretching or collapsing unpredictably. Travelers report difficulty tracking distance or pace. Peripheral vision is constantly engaged, yet direct focus often produces blank space where shadows were moments before. Awareness of self and surroundings is heightened, leaving a lasting impression of the hollow's influence. Moonlight interacts with the landscape, creating shifting lines of illumination. Beams reflect off rocks, twisted tree limbs, and wet surfaces, casting elongated shadows that move in tandem with the natural forms yet suggest independent motion. Light and dark merge, forming illusions of creatures, figures, and movement that cannot be captured fully by memory or photograph. Sound behaves in ways that defy expectation. Footsteps echo inconsistently. Leaves rustle though there is no wind. The murmuring intensifies when visitors focus on a particular area, then recedes when attention shifts. The screams from the depths of the hollow punctuate silence in abrupt bursts, producing a rhythm that feels deliberate and responsive to human presence. Movement requires care. Travelers instinctively slow their pace, eyes scanning constantly. Shadows flit at the edge of perception, drifting along surfaces and across paths. The whispers guide attention subtly, drawing gaze to corners or recesses that may contain no object. The hollow seems to respond to observation itself, amplifying sensation in ways that cannot be anticipated. Visitors describe the experience as immersive rather than violent. There is no physical threat beyond fleeting touches or the psychological weight of observation. The hollow exists as a responsive environment, shaping perception, sound, light, and awareness. It tests attention and presence, producing an intense experience without direct harm. Attempts to document the phenomena are rarely successful. Cameras capture only dark shapes or faint glimmers of movement. Audio records ambient rustling or distant echoes but not the whispers or screams as experienced. The subjective intensity of the hollow cannot be fully reproduced, reinforcing the sense that perception itself is part of the environment. This reinforces the sense that perception itself is part of the environment. Reinforcing the sense that perception itself is part of the environment. This is a critical moment in the narrative. The subjective experience cannot be fully captured. Perception is a fragile thing. The environment is alive. Time spent in Ravena's hollow leaves a lasting impression. Shadows, whispers, and fleeting touches remain vivid in memory. The sensation of being observed continues long after leaving, producing heightened awareness in ordinary spaces. Travelers carry the hollow with them, a persistent reminder of a place where perception bends. Observation feels alive, and the natural environment merges with the uncanny. The sensation of being observed continues long after leaving, producing heightened awareness in ordinary spaces. Shadow, sound, and presence converge when confronted, and whisper through the air. Echo without origin, and screams erupt from unseen recesses, creating an environment that observes, responds, and lingers long after the traveler has departed, preserving the hollow's mysteries in memory and imagination. Shadowrock Cave lies hidden deep within a rugged hillside, its entrance framed by jagged boulders and twisted roots. By day, the opening appears unremarkable, dark and silent, the air cool and still. Visitors who enter expect ordinary echoes, the crunch of gravel beneath boots, the occasional drip of water from overhead formations. Yet from the first step inside, the cave reveals that it is anything but ordinary. Stalactites and stalagmites groan and scrape with subtle motion, producing unnatural sounds that do not match the weight of footsteps. Figures appear in the shadows. At the edge of vision, vague humanoid shapes emerge between pillars and in dark alcoves. They are motionless for moments, then shift or vanish completely when approached. Visitors report catching glimpses of movement just beyond peripheral sight, only to find empty passages when they turn directly. The figures seem aware, watching silently, yet never advancing or speaking. Sounds of screams echo unexpectedly. A sudden, sharp cry bursts from deep within the cave, yet it cannot be localized. Voices seem to come from multiple directions simultaneously, bouncing off walls and ceilings, merging into a disorienting chorus. Drips, echoes, and the hum of shifting stone amplify the effect, creating a sense of omnipresent attention. Temperature shifts abruptly. The air grows colder in isolated patches, brushing against skin and clothing. Some visitors report feeling warmth in one area immediately followed by an icy draft. The sensation is fleeting but noticeable, heightening awareness of movement and sound within the cave. Time and distance distort. Passages appear longer than measured. Narrow corridors feel expansive. Light from headlamps casts shadows that stretch and bend unexpectedly, making spatial judgment difficult. Explorers note that rock formations seem to shift subtly between glances, creating the impression of a living labyrinth, aware of their navigation. Footsteps echo without origin. Visitors hear steps that do not align with their own movements or those of companions. The echoes fall out of sequence, sometimes approaching, sometimes retreating, creating a sensation of being followed or accompanied by unseen entities. The pattern is irregular yet deliberate, reinforcing the perception that the cave is aware of every presence within. A fleeting brush on the shoulder, a light tug at clothing, a gentle nudge along the back. The sensations are subtle yet undeniable. They leave a chilling awareness that movement within the cave is not isolated to physical presence, but extends into perception itself. Attempts to record the phenomena yield inconsistent results. Cameras capture the cave's walls and formations, yet shifting rocks are rarely visible. Audio devices register echoes, low hums, or static, but the screams and whispers often elude detection. Measurements of temperature or humidity fluctuate unpredictably, coinciding with reports of physical sensations and visual anomalies. Repeated visits produce similar experiences. Travelers describe the same shifting formations, vanishing figures, and omnidirectional screams. The pattern suggests continuity, a persistent awareness embedded in the cave itself. Those who venture multiple nights note that the intensity of the phenomena correlates with the number of people inside, as if the cave is responsive to presence. Shadows move independently of light. Shapes appear and vanish in corners, along walls, and between formations. When observers focus directly, the shapes disappear, only to reappear elsewhere moments later. The interplay of light, shadow, and stone heightens disorientation and tension. The cave feels alive. Every creak, echo, shift, and whisper carries purpose. The environment reacts to attention and movement. The rocks themselves seem to breathe, responding subtly to observers. Visitors feel that each step, glance, and sound is noted, recorded, and incorporated into the experience. Some explorers leave shaken. They awaken from moments of disorientation, feeling pressure or touches, hearing the faint remnants of screams, and recalling shadows at the edges of vision. Shadowrock Cave functions in daylight as a natural formation. Its passages are solid, and sunlight penetrates the entrance, illuminating stone and gravel. Yet night or prolonged absence of natural light brings out the awareness within the walls, the subtle movements, and a chorus of unplaceable sounds. Visitors leave with lasting impressions. The sensations of shifting rock, vanishing figures, and omnidirectional screams remain vivid. The cave's presence lingers, a reminder that Shadowrock is more than a geological formation. It is a space that observes, responds, and interacts with every explorer who enters, defying conventional understanding while remaining entirely tangible in perception. Shadowrock Cave endures as both structure and presence. It is solid, weathered, and natural by day. It is solid, weathered, and natural by day. It is alive, attentive, and uncanny by night. Shadows move, stones shift. And unseen voices echo through every passage. Travelers leave altered, carrying the memory of a cave that is alive in subtle, deliberate ways. Recording presence and creating an experience that cannot be fully explained but cannot be forgotten. Howling Point Cave lies along a jagged coastline, its mouth carved into black stone by centuries of wind and waves. From a distance, the cavern appears quiet, a dark hollow beneath cliffs battered by the surf. By day, the roar of the ocean masks most other sounds, waves curling and crashing against jagged rock. By night, the cave takes on a different character, a resonance that unsettles even the most seasoned visitors. Wind funnels into the cave with a whistle that carries far inside, amplifying every echo and reverberation. But travelers report something more than wind. Screams rise from the depths, sharp and piercing, impossibly human in tone. The waves below the cave seem to respond. Some visitors describe seeing faces forming in the froth and spray. Expressions contorted in fear or pain. The shapes appear briefly, emerging from the rolling water, before dissolving back into foam. Others see figures crouched among the rocks, pale and indistinct, shifting with the movement of waves. The phenomenon is fleeting, impossible to capture in detail, yet vivid in memory. Explorers feel the presence of the cave long after leaving. A subtle pressure settles along the shoulders and back, as if the stone itself watches. Many report waking during the night to find scratches along their arms. Faint but unmistakable, as though something invisible brushed against them while they slept. No insect, no tool, no logical explanation accounts for these marks. The interior of the cave is dark, uneven, and cold. Rocks jut sharply, water drips from the ceiling. And the floor is slick with moisture. Every step echoes, magnified by the hollow structure. Sounds of the surf mix with the human-like screams, creating a layered experience that is disorienting. Even those accustomed to caves report an acute awareness, a heightened sensitivity to every movement, every shift of wind, and every irregularity in the echoes. A heightened sensitivity to every movement, every shift of wind, and every irregularity in the echoes. The faces in the waves seem to appear in response to observers. Travelers describe leaning closer to the surf, trying to see more clearly. Only for the images to vanish as attention intensifies. The effect is hypnotic, compelling, and unnerving. Blurring the line between perception and reality. Visitors often describe the sensations as interactive. The screams rise and fall with the approach of people into the cave. Footsteps along the rock seem to alter the rhythm of the sound. The wind appears to change course slightly, carrying the screams toward or away from the observer. The cave feels alive, as though it responds deliberately to the presence of those who enter. The environment outside amplifies the effect. The ocean, restless and unpredictable, heightens tension. Mist drifts through the entrance, cold and salty, curling around ankles and dampening vision. Even in daylight, the cave exerts a subtle influence, a sense that it is not merely a hollow in the rock but a space charged with observation and response. Attempts to document the phenomena are largely inconclusive. Cameras capture the cave and waves, but the faces in the surf and the human-like screams do not appear. Audio recordings pick up wind and surf, yet fail to capture the anguished tones reported by those present. The scratches on arms leave no traceable cause, and the subtle pressure felt by visitors cannot be measured. The cave exists as a space where perception and reality intersect, defying technology and logic. The experience is cumulative. The longer someone remains inside, the more pronounced the sensations become. Human-like screams echo louder. Faces emerge more vividly. And the pressure along the back intensifies. The cave enforces alertness, a state of immersion that engages every sense simultaneously. Travelers report difficulty distinguishing between movement of the water, echoes in the stone, and the sensation of unseen presence. Animals avoid the cave at night. Birds circle above, landing elsewhere. Small mammals stay away from the entrance. The absence of ordinary life emphasizes the sense of isolation and amplifies the perception of human-like activity. Visitors often describe the surrounding cliffs as silent witnesses, framing the cave as a place apart, governed by rules outside ordinary experience. Howling Point Cave continues to endure, waves rolling beneath, wind funneling through its mouth, and screams echoing in the night. Faces appear and vanish in the surf, shadows brush against skin, and subtle markings remain after visitors leave. Each journey into the cave leaves a lasting impression, a blend of sound, vision, and touch that persists long after departure. The cave functions as both natural formation and threshold into the extraordinary. It shapes perception, amplifies awareness, and interacts with those who enter. Visitors leave carrying memory, unease, and fascination, forever marked by the echoes, the faces, and the presence that defines Howling Point Cave. Crescent Moon Cove lies tucked beneath jagged cliffs, where waves lap against a narrow shoreline and the sea meets stone in endless rhythm. The cave curves naturally into the cliffs, forming a crescent shape that swallows light and bends sound. Travelers approaching feel the air grow cooler and heavier, carrying the scent of salt and damp rock. Each step along the uneven sand brings awareness of the cove's isolation and the quiet pulse of the ocean. Screams echo at irregular intervals. They rise sharply, then fade into the natural sounds of water and wind. Shadows move independently of the water. The source is never visible. The sound emerges from deep within the crescent, amplified by stone and shadow, creating a sense that the cave itself remembers voices long gone. Where moonlight touches the wet stone, shapes shift without correspondence to waves or reflection. They stretch along walls, curve across ceilings, and appear just beyond reach. Sometimes shadows form patterns that suggest movement of human or animal forms, but no figure is ever fully discernible. Their motion is deliberate, autonomous, and unsettling. The cave amplifies perception. Every sound carries differently. Footsteps on sand echo unnaturally, even when distant. The crashing of waves resonates through rock, merging with whispers of wind and water. Observers feel vibrations beneath their feet, subtle pulses that heighten awareness of both the environment and what may be unseen. Light and darkness interact in strange ways. Moonlight filters through the cave entrance, yet the far recesses remain blackened. Reflections from wet stone create patterns that appear to shift when viewed indirectly. Each glance across the floor or wall may reveal forms that vanish when focused on directly. The interplay of illumination and shadow distorts distance and space, making the cave feel both vast and intimate. The rhythm of the tide affects experience. Rising and falling waves carry sound, shadows, and movement in sync with water. Footfalls in sand produce awareness. Observers note that screams or whispers often coincide with the high tide, and shadows respond to patterns of light that shift with the moon's reflection. The effect creates a sense of connection between natural forces and the cove's presence, as if the stone itself participates in perception. Every step is amplified, echoing off walls and ceilings, and distant echoes suggest presence elsewhere, creating the impression that movement is mirrored by unseen observers. Whispers mingle with the cries. Soft murmurs drift along the cave's curvature, often forming phrases indistinct yet precise in tone. Shadows and sound converge. Forms stretch along walls, rise from wet rock. The combination creates an immersive atmosphere where perception is layered. Each observer becomes part of the cove's rhythm, walking through a space that is both physical and perceptual, ordinary yet imbued with memory and presence. The crescent shape amplifies these effects. Sound travels along its curve, reflecting in ways that distort origin. Shadows bend and twist along concave walls, creating paths and forms that are inconsistent with natural light. The environment interacts with observation, ensuring that every glance and movement is integrated into the cove's ongoing awareness. Time feels altered within the cave. Minutes stretch when listening to echoes, compress when moving through shadows. The mind struggles to reconcile perception with physical reality. Sound, light, and motion blend into a continuous flow, producing the sensation that the cave and tide are guiding attention and shaping the experience of those present. The far recesses hold mystery. Beyond the visible stone, darkness deepens and reflections vanish. Shadows appear to move along unseen surfaces. Sounds, whispers, and cries continue, producing a sense of depth and continuity that defies the finite space of the cove. Observers sense that the cave contains more than can be perceived, a living memory of movement, sound, and presence. Exiting the cave provides relief, but not complete detachment. The sound of the tide returns to ordinary rhythm. Shadows retreat into ordinary perception. Moonlight no longer distorts surfaces. Yet memory of movement, echoing cries, and autonomous shadows persists. Travelers carry the sensation of having been observed, of having interacted with forces beyond ordinary awareness. Crescent Moon Cove endures as a place between worlds. It is ordinary in rock and water, extraordinary in effect. The shape, shadows, echoes, and rhythmic tide transform a simple cave into an environment where perception is layered, memory lingers, and natural forces participate in an ongoing interaction with those who enter. The cove waits silently. Shadows shift, water laps, and cries echo faintly within its curve. Each arrival contributes to its presence, reinforcing the rhythm of observation. Where the ordinary meets the uncanny, where every step, glance, and breath becomes part of an enduring memory of stone, water, shadow, and sound. Silent Tide Hollow lies at the base of rugged cliffs where the sea meets jagged rock. The cave entrance disappears entirely during high tide, swallowed by waves that crash relentlessly against the stone. Even at low tide, the hollow exudes a weighty presence, the air damp and cold, carrying the scent of salt, seaweed, and something older, darker, and unplaceable. The cliffs loom overhead, casting deep shadows that merge with the darkness of the cave, creating a sense of isolation that begins before one even steps inside. Visitors report hearing screaming from within the hollow, carried outward by the wind and the waves. The sound is high and jagged, echoing along the cliffs and across the tide pools. It rises and falls unpredictably, sometimes seeming near, other times distant, yet never originating from any visible source. The echoes blend with the natural rhythm of surf, producing a disorienting effect that unsettles even those familiar with the coast. The cave interior is uneven, the floors slick with tidal residue and slick stone. Pools of brackish water gather in depressions, reflecting dim light from the entrance or moon above. Surfaces are blackened with algae and mineral deposits, giving walls a wet, gleaming texture. Every step produces a subtle squelch or echo, amplifying the sense of presence within the hollow. Even in silence, the space feels alive, as though it registers movement, breath, and attention. Visitors often experience dizziness and nausea inside the cave. The combination of uneven surfaces, irregular light, and the echoing screams create sensory disorientation. Steps seem longer than they should be, and perception of direction becomes unreliable. Shadows appear to shift independently of movement, and reflections on wet stone can momentarily suggest shapes or figures where none exist. The effect is cumulative, pressing on balance and orientation, leaving explorers uncertain of their own motion. The hollow seems to respond to presence. Screams intensify when individuals linger or move closer to the inner recesses. The echoes appear synchronized with breathing and steps, rising and falling as if the space itself interacts with awareness. Even attempts to ignore the phenomena fail, the screams persist, omnipresent and indistinct yet deliberate in rhythm and intensity. Water inside the cave behaves unpredictably. Small tide pools ripple though no current is visible. Occasional spray rises from cracks in the stone, misting visitors with briny moisture. Some explorers report feeling a sudden chill in these moments, a cold that sinks to the chest and produces shivers beyond ordinary reaction. The effect accompanies a heightened awareness of sound, shadow, and movement, as though the hollow is attentive. Time perception shifts within silent tide hollow. Minutes stretch unnaturally, and steps feel repeated even when retraced. Shadows linger longer than they should, and echoes return in patterns that defy expectation. Visitors often note that the depth of the hollow seems exaggerated, corridors of stone and tidal pools extending farther than they should, producing a sense of endlessness. The screaming is accompanied at times by other auditory phenomena. Low murmurs drift along walls, indistinct yet coherent in cadence. Footsteps echo along stone paths, measured and deliberate, though no one is present. Sounds rise and fall in layers, creating a complex auditory landscape that is immersive and disorienting. The combination of scream, echo, and natural water sound produces tension that builds steadily with movement into the hollow. Reflections in tidal pools create visual anomalies. Light from openings or moonbeams bends across wet stone and water, casting shifting shadows. Shapes appear in reflections that do not exist in reality. Fleeting glimpses of figures kneeling, standing, or moving along the walls. The effect is subtle, always at the edge of perception, yet powerful enough to compound disorientation and unease. The high tide transforms the hollow entirely. The entrance vanishes beneath crashing waves, leaving the inner recesses completely enclosed. Sound changes, with water flowing and splashing in rhythms that blend with the echoes of screaming. Explorers inside report a sensation of containment, as though the hollow has closed itself from the outside world. The walls seem to pulse with sound and presence, heightening tension, nausea, and disorientation. Despite its danger and disorientation, Silent Tide Hollow continues to attract the curious. Those who approach feel the pull of mystery, the combination of sound, shadow, and isolation compelling exploration. Each journey is immersive, placing travelers in a space where ordinary rules of perception, sound, and movement are suspended. Visitors leave with lasting impressions of the hollow. The screams echo in memory. The shifting shadows remain vivid. And the sensation of being observed by the cave persists. The wet, blackened walls, the uneven stone, the tidal pools, and the disappearance of the entrance at high tide combine to create a space that is unforgettable, disorienting, and persistent in thought long after departure. Silent Tide Hollow endures as a place where perception is stretched, space is altered, and the presence of something unseen is undeniable. The tide rises and falls, the screams continue, and explorers experience dizziness, nausea, and awareness of something beyond ordinary comprehension. The hollow waits, dark and alive, at the base of jagged cliffs, a site where water, stone, and shadow converge to create a haunting and unforgettable journey. Ironclad Cave lies hidden at the base of a jagged cliff, its entrance half swallowed by shadow and rock. The walls inside are sharp and rust-colored, streaked with mineral deposits that catch flickering light from torches or lanterns. Every surface seems ancient, worn by time and water, yet still dangerous to touch. Visitors stepping inside immediately notice the oppressive weight of the space, the air heavy with moisture and the scent of earth and stone. A sound echoes through the cave almost immediately. Chains dragging across rocks, distant but distinct, reverberate through the narrow passages. Some explorers hear the scraping of metal against stone at the same time they feel a subtle vibration beneath their feet. The dragging chains seem to follow movement, appearing closer or farther depending on attention, yet no person or mechanism is ever found. The cave is dark, yet reflections on the shallow water pools along the floor produce a strange clarity. Figures appear standing in the water, unmoving and silent. Their forms are vague but distinctly human, sometimes half-submerged or fully visible. Visitors describe a profound awareness that these figures are watching, their attention unwavering, even though no sound or gesture accompanies them. Moving through Ironclad Cave heightens all senses. Footsteps echo strangely, amplifying in some sections and fading in others. Shadows cast by jagged walls shift in ways that seem to follow the observer, extending farther than their source. Light from lanterns or torches flickers against rust-colored stone, creating shifting patterns that appear almost alive. The cave's environment produces disorientation. Distances feel altered. Paths curve unexpectedly, leading to the impression that travelers are retracing steps even when moving forward. Reflections in water distort space, making walls and figures appear closer or farther than they are. Every step requires deliberate attention, reinforcing the sense that the cave itself is aware of presence. Visitors report physical sensations that accompany perception of the figures and chains. A light pressure may brush against shoulders, or a subtle vibration may rise through the feet. Skin prickles along the arms or back. These sensations are fleeting, yet convincing, producing heightened awareness and tension throughout the exploration. The dragging chains grow louder or softer depending on movement and focus. Some report hearing chains scrape behind them even when stationary, then stopping abruptly when attention turns toward the sound. The effect is consistent enough to suggest pattern. Yet no rational explanation emerges. Sound interacts with the jagged architecture to amplify tension, producing both audible and psychological unease. Water within the cave adds to the atmosphere. Pools and trickles reflect torchlight and create mirrored images of the jagged walls. The figures in the water remain still, yet the reflections distort slightly, producing an effect that is both real and illusory. Observers report that the figures seem to shift position in peripheral vision, remaining still when confronted directly, enhancing the sense of observation and presence. The cave also affects perception of time. Moments of exploration can stretch indefinitely, with sections that feel longer than expected. Returning to previously passed areas can produce the impression of new passages or altered geometry. Visitors often lose track of exact distance traveled, leaving them acutely aware of their own movement and the surrounding environment. The jagged walls themselves produce subtle auditory effects. Tapping on stone can echo unpredictably, creating an impression of multiple sources. Footsteps may be mirrored by faint secondary sounds that fade irregularly. Combined with the dragging chains and water reflections, the cave produces a layered, immersive experience where ordinary cause and effect is unreliable. Despite the intensity of experience, Ironclad Cave is not hostile in a direct sense. The chains do not strike, the figures do not advance, and the jagged walls are naturally present rather than actively threatening. The cave shapes perception, attention, and awareness, creating an environment that is immersive, disorienting, and psychologically compelling without overt aggression. Attempts to document the phenomena produce inconsistent results. Cameras capture jagged walls, reflective pools, and faint shadows, but rarely reproduce the dragging chains or the human-like figures. Audio equipment records ambient echoes, trickles of water, and occasional scraping, yet the sense of presence, observation, and tension remains outside measurable capture. Visitors report that careful, deliberate movement reduces intensity slightly, though not entirely. Slow exploration, steady focus, and attention to footing help manage dizziness or heightened tension, but the caveat's influence persists in awareness, perception, and sensation. The experience is immersive, demanding alertness and caution. When leaving Ironclad Cave, the impressions linger. The sound of dragging chains echoes in memory. The figures in the water remain vivid, and the shifting reflections and jagged shadows leave a lasting impression of space and presence. Travelers carry the experience with them, aware that the cave exists as more than rock and water, shaping perception in subtle yet undeniable ways. Ironclad Cave endures as a space where observation, shadow, and sound converge. Chains drag without source, figures stand silently in water, and jagged walls distort light and perception. Visitors leave altered, carrying the memory of a place that observes, responds, and persists. A space where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and every step is measured by unseen awareness. A space where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and every step is measured by unseen awareness. A space where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and every step is measured by unseen awareness. A space where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and every step is measured by unseen awareness. Visitors leave altered, carrying the memory of a place that observes, responds, and persists. A space where observation, shadow, and sound converge. Blackwater Hollow lies hidden beneath a dense canopy of trees, its entrance partially obscured by moss-covered rocks and twisted roots. By daylight, it appears as a simple crevice in the hillside, dark and inviting curiosity. Explorers enter expecting narrow passages, the sound of dripping water, and the echo of footsteps on stone. Yet from the first step inside, the cave reveals that it is more than maps and measurements can convey. The cave seems deeper than anyone anticipates. Passages stretch into darkness that swallows light completely. Turns and corridors extend farther than expected, folding back upon themselves in ways that make sense only in perception. Each step produces echoes that travel unpredictably, bouncing off walls and ceilings, creating a sense of immensity beyond comprehension. The air feels heavier, saturated with the weight of the unseen and the unknown. Screams rise from the darkness. They are sudden, sharp, and often overlapping, as if multiple voices cry at once. The sound seems to come from everywhere, surrounding explorers without a clear source. Echoes twist through the passages, merging and separating in patterns that make it impossible to determine origin or direction. The intensity fluctuates, rising in volume and clarity before fading into distant whispers. The water within the cave holds its own mysteries. Pools of still black water lie in depressions along the floor, reflecting faint light from headlamps. Some explorers swear they see strands of long hair floating in the currents, moving independently of flow. The shapes vanish when approached or illuminated, leaving only ripples and the lingering sensation of presence. Temperature and atmosphere shift unpredictably. Cool drafts move through the cave even when entrances are sealed, brushing skin and hair. Humidity rises and falls in waves. The air feels alive, pressing gently against bodies, heightening awareness of the unseen. Explorers report sudden chills that cannot be explained by natural airflow, an effect that seems focused and deliberate. Shadows behave independently of light. They stretch and shift along walls, folding across stalagmites and ledges. Shapes appear and disappear at the periphery of vision, sometimes mirrored in the water below, sometimes vanishing entirely. The interplay of shadow and reflection disorients, making corridors feel longer, ceilings higher, and the cave itself expansive beyond measure. Every footstep produces multiple echoes, some delayed, some ahead of the source. Drips of water seem synchronized with unseen movement. Whispers intertwine with the overlapping screams, creating a sensation that the cave is not simply a hollowed rock but a living entity, reacting to presence and attention. Explorers note that minutes stretch longer than expected. Paths walked feel longer than measured distances. The pulsation of screams and whispers seems to follow their movement, marking each step and pause. Light from lamps appears to dim or shift subtly depending on focus, creating an environment where perception itself is tested. Attempts to document the phenomena produce inconsistent results. Cameras record the walls, water, and stone floors, yet the floating hair and overlapping voices rarely appear. Audio devices capture echoes and faint hums, but the clarity of the screams and whispers remains elusive. Instruments measuring temperature or air pressure fluctuate, registering localized changes that align with the experiences of those inside. The cave feels aware. It responds subtly to presence, movement, and attention. Shadows move in synchronization with explorers. Sounds fluctuate in intensity relative to position. The water reflects light and motion in ways that seem deliberate. Those within the hollow feel observed, measured, and noted by the space itself. Some explorers leave visibly shaken. They awaken mid-journey, sensing chills, noticing damp traces on skin, or recalling faint whispers and overlapping screams. The impressions of floating hair or shifting shadows remain vivid, haunting memory long after leaving the cave. Repeated visits reveal consistent patterns. Travelers report the same phenomena: immensity greater than expected, overlapping screams, floating hair in the water, temperature shifts, and shadows that defy light sources. Each experience reinforces the perception that Blackwater Hollow retains awareness, responding to the presence of visitors in subtle, deliberate ways. The surrounding forest enhances isolation and perception. The presence of the hollow is a palpable force, a sentient entity that wraps itself around the explorers. Its rock walls, water, and corridors exist physically, measurable in distance and form. Yet at night, the cave becomes alive with observation and interaction. Shadows, echoes, screams, and reflections act in concert, creating an experience that is simultaneously tangible and impossible to explain fully. Explorers leave carrying memory. The overlapping screams, the floating strands of hair, the shifting shadows, and the cold presence of the cave linger in awareness. Blackwater Hollow impresses itself on memory, leaving a lasting sensation of a space that is alive, aware, and attentive to every movement, breath, and thought. The cave endures, unchanged yet responsive. By day, it is simply rock and water, narrow passages and faint light. By night, it is expansive, alive, and attentive. A place where perception, sound, and presence converge. Explorers emerge altered, carrying the knowledge that Blackwater Hollow is more than a cave. It is an experience, an entity, and a threshold into the unknown. Where shadows move, screams rise. And the water seems to hold memory of all who enter. Eaglea's Watch Cave clings to the side of a sheer cliff, its entrance barely visible against the rugged rock face. Jagged stone drops steeply below, while above, the cliff continues to rise, treacherous and unforgiving. By day, the cave appears as a dark slit in the rock, a natural formation shaped by centuries of wind and rain. Visitors approaching can feel the weight of the cliffs pressing in, a reminder of the danger inherent in the terrain. As evening falls, the atmosphere changes. Footsteps echo, but not in ways that match expectation. Visitors report hearing sounds both above and below them simultaneously. The noises are deliberate, measured, yet impossible to locate. Each step resonates through the stone, overlapping with the natural creaks and shifts of the cliff. The effect is disorienting, a sense that the space itself is alive and attentive to every movement. Figures emerge in the shadows. They crouch low, pressed against the rock walls, indistinct yet clearly human in form. Observers catch glimpses of them from the corner of their eyes, only for the shapes to vanish when approached. The figures appear and disappear unpredictably, their presence felt more acutely than seen. The crouching posture suggests watchfulness, awareness, and intent, as if the cave and its surrounding cliffs are alive with unseen observers. The interior of the cave is dark and uneven. Loose stones and jagged edges create treacherous footing. Visitors moving carefully report the sense of being followed, a weight in the air, and the subtle sound of movement that does not match their own. The space feels layered, as if multiple presences occupy the same environment, some above, some within the shadows of the cave itself. Outside, the cliffs rise sharply. Wind whistles through cracks and ledges, amplifying every sound. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the rock face. Observers describe a sensation of being watched not only inside the cave but from the cliffs above. Occasionally, glimpses of movement appear on the higher ledges, figures crouched or shifting, vanishing when looked at directly. The combination of vertical space and shadows creates an environment that is impossible to fully observe, intensifying the sense of disorientation. Footsteps and movement echo throughout the cave and cliffs, layered in ways that make the source impossible to identify. A sound above may be mirrored below, a shuffle in one corner reflected in the opposite end of the cave. Visitors describe the echoes as deliberate, a rhythm not coinciding with their own motion. The auditory environment transforms the space into something both immersive and unnerving, compelling awareness of every step and every shadow. The figures themselves are fleeting yet persistent. Observers report seeing them crouched low against walls, blending into shadows, their forms visible only at the edge of perception. When approached, they vanish instantly, leaving empty space and the lingering impression of presence. The repetition of appearance and disappearance heightens attention, making even ordinary movement feel significant. The cave's interior amplifies subtle sensations. Air hangs dense, cold, and still. Loose gravel shifts underfoot without cause. The faintest brush of movement along the walls can feel like contact. Visitors describe an acute awareness of vertical space, the presence above and below, and the shadows that seem to watch from every angle. Every sound is heightened, every shape scrutinized by perception. Every shape scrutinized by perception. And the shadows that seem to watch from every angle. Every sound is heightened. And every shape scrutinized by perception. Every shape scrutinized by perception, every sound heightened. Explorers report a compounding effect over time. The longer one remains inside the cave, the more intense the impressions of movement, shadows, and sounds. Footsteps echo, figures crouch and vanish, and the wind carries whispers that are impossible to locate. Time seems altered, minutes stretching and compressing, creating a perception that the cave exists beyond ordinary chronology. The cliff environment outside the cave contributes to the phenomena. Light falls unevenly, creating pockets of shadow that mask movement. Loose rocks shift silently, sometimes in response to the wind, other times seemingly independent. Even small gestures, a turned head or a pause in walking, are mirrored by unseen presence, reinforcing the sense of observation. Attempts to record the phenomena often fail. Cameras capture only the cave, the jagged rocks, and the distant cliffs. Audio devices pick up wind, shifting stones, and occasional animal sounds. Yet fail to capture footsteps, whispers, or the presence of crouched figures. The experience exists fully in perception, vivid and undeniable for those present, yet impervious to documentation. Visitors often leave the cave and cliffs with a lingering awareness. The weight of unseen observers. The layered echoes of footsteps. And the fleeting crouched figures remain in memory. Explorers recall the sensation of vertical space filled with presence. The cave itself alive with watchfulness. And the cliffs above and below participating in the experience. Iglia's Watch Cave endures as a site where perception and environment converge. Figures crouch, shadows shift, footsteps echo above and below. And the space compels acute awareness. Each journey through the cave and across the cliffs leaves a lasting impression. A memory of observation, presence, and the layered realities of vertical space. That define the haunting character of Iglia's Watch Cave. Moonlit abyss opens wide to the ocean, a cavern carved from stone where darkness stretches deep and the air carries the scent of salt and damp. The walls rise high, jagged and uneven, reflecting the silver of moonlight on wet surfaces. Water laps at the edges of the cave floor, merging with pools that mirror the stars above. Visitors feel the chill immediately, a damp coolness that seeps into clothing and skin, carrying a weight that is both physical and perceptual. Screams echo across the water. They rise abruptly, then fall into silence, unnaturally stretched and amplified by the cave's curves. Shadows twist in impossible shapes along the walls. Waves reflect the sound in fractured patterns, bouncing off walls and ceiling, creating an impression of voices both near and far. The cries are human in tone yet distorted, carrying urgency and despair in equal measure. Forms stretch vertically and horizontally, bending around corners and across stone surfaces. Light from the moon reflects off wet rock to create distortions that cannot be replicated by ordinary geometry. Shapes coil, twist, and dissolve, sometimes forming humanoid outlines, sometimes abstract patterns that defy perception. The cave amplifies sound and movement. Every footstep on wet stone resonates, echoing far beyond the observer. Water sloshes softly, yet it is magnified by distance and reflection. Even soft whispers are carried along the walls and across the surface, merging with natural echoes to produce an immersive and unsettling environment. The moonlight creates shifting perception. Silver reflections on pools of water create illusions of depth and movement. Shadows lengthen unpredictably, shapes appear to float above the surface, and reflections merge with physical forms, blurring the line between solid and reflected. The light guides attention, pulling eyes toward spaces that may hold nothing or may conceal presence. Time feels altered within the abyss. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours. Sounds arrive delayed or in advance, making sequences unpredictable. Movement of the waves, shadows, and echoes combine to distort perception of distance and orientation. Observers notice that the cave seems to anticipate their steps, amplifying awareness of every motion. Figures appear in peripheral vision. They are fleeting, seen out of the corner of the eye. Shapes move in patterns that match observer movement, yet when looked at directly they vanish into stone and darkness. Their presence is intangible but undeniable, leaving a lingering impression of being observed. The water behaves unusually. Waves appear to rise and fall independently of tides, moving against expectation. Reflections shimmer with patterns that repeat yet shift when attention focuses. Ripples cross the surface in subtle alignment with sounds, suggesting coordination between water, echoes, and the cave's geometry. The walls themselves seem alive. Cracks and crevices carry subtle movements, shadows deepen and lighten without apparent cause. Moisture drips from ceiling edges, yet falls in irregular intervals, echoing in hollow spaces below. The cave holds memory in its stone, preserving traces of past movement and sound. Observers feel a weight in the air. A subtle pressure presses from all directions. Breathing seems to carry farther, footsteps feel heavier. And the skin becomes aware of temperature changes. The combination of echoes, reflections, and distorted shadows creates the sensation that the space itself is attentive, observing every step and gesture. Sounds are layered and continuous. The natural echo of water and stone mixes with untraceable murmurs. Occasional screeches of wind penetrate openings, merging with human-like cries. The result is a complex auditory tapestry that disorients and commands attention, making it impossible to separate environmental noise from the echoes of presence. The cave preserves an ongoing rhythm. Movement, shadow, and sound interact in patterns that repeat yet shift. Each visitor contributes imperceptibly, altering the flow of echoes, shadows, and reflections. The space appears responsive, alive with an awareness that is subtle but persistent. Exiting the cave brings relief. The echo of screams fades gradually, shadows diminish in complexity, and the air warms slightly. Shadows diminish in complexity. And the air warms slightly. Moonlight reflecting on open water beyond the entrance. Restores ordinary perception. Yet memory of twisting shadows and impossible forms remains. Observers carry the impression of having moved through a space that is both tangible and alive with history. Moonlit abyss endures as a threshold. It is ordinary in stone and water, extraordinary in perception. The cave, its pool, and the reflective surfaces transform a simple passage into an immersive encounter, where light, shadow, and sound interact with awareness. The screams, the reflections, and the twisting shapes persist, waiting for the next visitor to experience the depth, the weight, and the lingering memory of this ocean-carved abyss. The cave waits silently. Moonlight continues to reflect, water laps softly, and shadows remain, twisting and stretching along the walls. Screams echo faintly with the tide. And the air holds subtle movement that will interact with every new step. Moonlit abyss is a space where perception, memory, and environment converge. A threshold between the ordinary and the uncanny, where every crossing becomes part of its enduring presence. Fog Veil Cave sits at the base of steep cliffs, its entrance a dark void into which dense fog pours each night. The mist drifts from the surrounding forest and settles across the rocky ground, curling into the cavern as if alive. Travelers approaching feel it immediately, a damp, cold weight that clings to skin and clothing. Visibility drops to a few feet, and familiar shapes become distorted, bending perception with every step closer to the cave mouth. The sense of unease grows as the travelers continue deeper into the cave, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Inside, the fog thickens further, swallowing sound and light. Whispers emerge from the haze, soft and deliberate, calling names with precise intonation. The voices seem intimate and directed, as though the cave knows each person individually. Travelers strain to locate the source, yet there is none to be found. The echoes travel along stone walls, bouncing unpredictably and creating the illusion of multiple speakers in different locations simultaneously. Figures appear intermittently within the fog. They are pale and indistinct, visible only briefly before vanishing into the mist. Many wear old-fashioned clothing, coats, dresses, and hats that hint at eras long past. Their movements are deliberate yet hesitant, as though replaying patterns frozen in time. They do not react to the presence of visitors, yet their gaze and posture create a sensation of being observed, scrutinized, or followed. The floor is uneven and slick with moisture, reflecting diffuse light in faint ripples. Pools of water gather in depressions, and the fog above them refracts into shifting shapes that seem almost solid. Each footstep produces a subtle echo, amplified and warped, adding to the disorientation. The cave is simultaneously silent and alive, each sound and shadow contributing to the sense of presence that is never fully understood. Explorers report a persistent chill within the fog. It presses against the chest, making breathing conscious and deliberate. The temperature drop is sudden at times, leaving visible breath and a cold weight that intensifies as travelers move deeper. The sensation seems tied to attention and proximity to the figures, reinforcing the impression that the cave responds to awareness. Time perception is altered within Fogvale Cave. Steps across the floor may feel longer than they should, and corridors appear to stretch unexpectedly. Shadows detach from sources of light and drift independently. Brief figures reappear in patterns that suggest rhythm, repetition, or perhaps memory, creating a layering of perception that is both immersive and unsettling. Visitors often notice the fog itself behaving strangely. It curls around figures, thickens in areas without wind, and shifts subtly with movement, guiding perception. Light from torches, flashlights, or moonbeams bends and reflects unpredictably, highlighting fleeting shapes or casting shadows where none exist. The effect is a visual and spatial distortion that amplifies the auditory phenomena of whispers and footsteps. The cave resists documentation. Cameras frequently produce blurred or distorted images, while audio recorders capture static or low-frequency murmurs without source. Attempting to trace the figures or reproduce the whispers proves difficult, as the fog and the cave seem to respond to attention and focus. Equipment often fails at the moments of strongest activity, reinforcing the perception of an environment resistant to observation. Explorers also report tactile phenomena. The fog brushes against skin as if carrying pressure or presence. Clothing feels damp beyond ambient moisture. Hands and arms sense subtle movements in the mist, fleeting and unexplained. These sensations heighten awareness of space and movement, making each step deliberate and measured. The figures themselves interact indirectly with the environment. Their presence aligns with changes in sound, temperature, and light. Each brief appearance leaves a lingering impression, a visual memory of presence without form, suggesting a continuity of experience beyond ordinary perception. The cave extends beyond the line of sight, dark passages disappearing into the fog. Explorers find that sounds, reflections, and shadows seem to originate from multiple depths simultaneously. Echoes repeat in ways that defy linear progression. The combination of fog, figures, whispers, and spatial distortion creates a layered environment, immersive and disorienting, where perception is continuously tested. Visitors leaving Fogvale Cave carry vivid memories of the experience. The whispers, the fleeting figures, the chill pressing on the chest, and the distorted fog remain in thought long after returning to open air. The effect is persistent, a sensation of having encountered a space that observes, responds, and preserves memory independent of ordinary reality. Fogvale Cave endures as a place where perception diverges from expectation. Its fog moves with intent, figures appear and vanish in old-fashioned attire. And whispers call out from nowhere. Temperature shifts, reflections, and sound distortions combine to create an environment that is immersive, persistent, and unforgettable. A hollow suspended between the natural world and something beyond. Lingering long after departure. Crimson Reef Cave lies hidden along a jagged shoreline where waves crash relentlessly against iron-colored rocks. Its entrance is narrow, framed by coral-stained stone and streaked with water that carries a faint red hue, seeping from cracks and collecting in shallow pools along the floor. The air inside is damp, heavy, and carries the faint tang of salt and mineral, giving an immediate sense of age and isolation. As explorers move deeper, the red-stained rocks appear to glow faintly in torchlight. Stains trace irregular lines and patches across the surfaces, as if something once flowed over them. The water within pools is dark and reflective, disturbed only by the slow drip from the ceiling. Every ripple catches light unnaturally, producing shifting shapes that seem alive and moving beneath the surface. Sounds begin subtly. Faint screams echo through the corridors, high-pitched and childlike. The transition is sudden, disorienting, and impossible to ignore. The echoes reverberate along walls and over water, sometimes coming from multiple directions simultaneously. The effect is immersive, producing tension that grows with every step deeper into the cave. Explorers report a sensation of being drawn toward the water. It is not visible as a force, yet movement slows as if gravity itself shifts subtly. Standing near pools produces a sense of pressure, an irresistible pull toward the reflective surfaces. Some describe it as if the water itself watches and encourages approach, a subtle, insistent presence that cannot be resisted entirely. Shadows in the cave seem to move independently of light. Stalactites and jagged edges cast distorted forms on the walls, which shift as the torch flickers. Peripheral vision detects motion where none should exist. Shapes may resemble human figures, crouched or watching, yet vanish when looked at directly. The combination of light, shadow, and red-stained surfaces creates an unsettling, constantly changing landscape. The sound of dripping water interacts with the screams and growls, forming an irregular rhythm that seems to synchronize with footsteps. Explorers often feel their attention drawn instinctively to particular areas. A pool, a stain on the rock, or a shadow in a corner captures focus as if the cave itself is guiding perception. Turning away does not release attention entirely, the environment subtly influences observation, keeping the visitor aware of water, stains, and shifting shadows at all times. The deeper sections of Crimson Reef Cave intensify these effects. Narrow passages open into chambers with larger pools. Reflections on the water appear to move independently, producing mirrored figures that do not correspond with any visible source. The growls echo louder here, resonating against rock walls, while the childlike cries seem to come from beneath the water itself. Physical sensations accompany perception. Explorers report chills running along the spine, prickling on the skin, and occasional pressure in the chest. The pull toward water intensifies in these areas, accompanied by a slight vertigo or dizziness. Attention becomes almost compulsive, drawn toward the pools and red-stained walls despite caution or conscious intent. Time feels distorted in the cave. Minutes can stretch into what seems like hours. Returning to the entrance often feels disorienting, as corridors appear longer or differently angled than memory suggests. The combination of altered perception, shifting reflections, and auditory anomalies produces a sense that normal rules of space and time are suspended. Despite the intensity of these experiences, the cave does not act with direct aggression. There is no contact beyond subtle pressure, no figure approaches directly. And the sounds, while alarming, remain contained to the environment. The effect is immersive and psychological, producing tension and heightened awareness rather than immediate danger. Attempts to document the phenomena are inconsistent. Cameras capture the red-stained rocks, water, and light reflections, but the shifting forms and pull toward water rarely appear. Audio devices record echoes and occasional drips, yet the full range of screams and growls experienced remains elusive. The subjective nature of observation reinforces the cave's mysterious and unsettling character. Explorers report that careful movement and attention reduce some sensations, though never fully. Slowing steps, controlling focus, and avoiding the edges of pools moderates the intensity of perceived pull and auditory disturbances. The environment remains aware in effect, shaping perception without overt interaction, producing a continuous sense of tension and observation. When leaving Crimson Reef Cave, the memory lingers. The red-stained surfaces, the shifting reflections. The shifting reflections, the pull of water. And the alternating cries remain vivid. The combination of visual, auditory, and physical sensations creates an impression that extends beyond the cave itself, leaving explorers aware of perception and presence in ways ordinary landscapes cannot replicate. Crimson Reef Cave endures as a space where water, sound, and perception converge. Red-stained walls gleam in torchlight, pools reflect shifting figures, and echoes transform from Childrena's screams into growls that linger in memory. Explorers leave altered, carrying the impression of a place alive with observation. Subtle force, and mystery, where ordinary expectation dissolves and every step is guided by unseen presence. Hollowave Cave lies hidden in a rugged cliffside, its entrance partially concealed by jagged rocks and thick moss. By day, it appears unremarkable, a dark mouth in stone, drawing only the curious and the daring. Visitors enter expecting the familiar echoes of stone corridors, the soft drip of water, and the faint scent of damp earth. Yet from the first step inside, the cave reveals that it is anything but ordinary. Sounds reflect endlessly, bouncing off walls and ceilings in unpredictable patterns. Footsteps echo not once but multiple times, sometimes ahead of movement, sometimes behind, creating a disorienting rhythm. Voices spoken aloud seem to fragment, scattering through passages in ways that defy logic. The echo twists, overlaps, and returns in layers, making it difficult to locate any sound's origin. Figures appear in pairs along the corridors. They are faint at first, shapes cast in shadow along the walls. Each figure seems to mirror the other, moving in tandem as if bound together. When approached, the shapes vanish instantly, leaving only empty passageways and a sensation of sudden absence. Travelers report glimpsing them repeatedly, always appearing at the edge of vision, always disappearing when attention is focused directly. Screams rise unpredictably from the darkness. They do not follow any pattern, often overlapping as if multiple voices cry at once. The intensity and direction seem fluid, sometimes originating from a distant chamber, other times appearing to come from within the listener's own mind. The sound resonates with perception, pressing against thoughts and creating a sensation of being surrounded. Temperature drops in isolated pockets, cold pressing along skin and clothing. The humidity fluctuates sharply, carrying with it subtle drafts that brush against arms, necks, and shoulders. Explorers feel the cave respond to their presence, as if attention itself provokes reaction. Shadows stretch unnaturally along walls and floors. They appear to move independently of light, stretching toward observers, then retracting when approached. The interplay of illumination and darkness distorts perception, making corridors feel longer and ceilings higher. The cave expands and contracts in ways that cannot be measured, altering spatial awareness. Water within the cave reflects light strangely. Pools of still water mirror shapes that do not exist, ripples forming without disturbance. Some visitors report glimpsing the paired figures reflected in water, only for the shapes to vanish when looked at directly. The reflections reinforce the impression that Hollow Wave is both observing and participating in the passage of explorers. Whispers echo through chambers and tunnels. Soft, indistinct, they travel along stone surfaces, appearing to move with the listener. Words are often unintelligible, fragmented, yet carry a deliberate cadence. The whispers amplify the disorientation created by echoes and moving shadows, layering the environment with perception that feels alive. Time becomes unreliable. Steps across the cave feel longer than measured distances. Moments stretch or collapse unpredictably. Headlamps illuminate walls and floors, yet shapes appear in the periphery that vanish before comprehension. Visitors often lose track of duration, experiencing minutes as hours and passages as far longer than they are. Attempts to document the cave produce incomplete results. Cameras capture only empty corridors, irregular reflections, and standard shadows. Audio devices record echoes and faint hums, but the overlapping screams and whispers often elude capture. Repeated visits confirm the cave's persistent patterns. Explorers consistently describe the same phenomena: endless echoes, paired figures, vanishing shapes, and screams that seem both external and internal. The consistency suggests the cave retains awareness, responding subtly to presence and movement. Physical sensations remain vivid. The cold presses along the back and shoulders. A faint brushing of air or a sense of contact accompanies movement. Goosebumps rise in isolated waves. The paired figures linger in memory. Screams persist, layered with perception, and the cave itself feels alive long after departure. Hollow Wave Cave functions as a natural formation by day. Sunlight reaches the entrance, revealing stone walls and shallow passages. Water appears calm, air stable, and echoes behave as expected. Yet at night, in darkness or deep shadow, the cave transforms into a space of layered perception, sound, and movement that defies conventional understanding. Visitors depart carrying memory. The echoes, paired figures, vanishing shapes, and screams remain vivid in awareness. Hollow Wave Cave impresses itself on perception, leaving a lasting sense of attentive presence that cannot be fully explained but cannot be ignored. The cave endures as both structure and presence. Its stone walls, water, and passageways exist physically, measurable and solid. Yet it also exists perceptually, alive with echoes, shadows, and whispers, responding to those who enter. Travelers emerge altered, carrying the knowledge that Hollow Wave Cave is not merely a cave, but an experience, a space of observation, and a threshold into the unknown. Darkwater Hollow lies hidden along a jagged stretch of coastline, its entrance carved into the cliffside by centuries of wind and relentless waves. At high tide, water rushes into the cave, carrying driftwood, seaweed, and flotsam, tumbling across the rocky floor. By day, the hollow appears natural and unremarkable, shaped by erosion and time. At night, however, it transforms into an environment that defies ordinary perception, alive with sound, shadow, and presence. Visitors approaching the cave after sunset immediately notice a chill. The air is heavier, damp and briny, carrying the scent of salt and stone. Even when the tide recedes and the water stands still, the hollow seems restless. Low, human-like screams echo through the space, sharp and urgent. They roll across the walls and ceiling, bouncing unpredictably, neither originating from the surf nor from any visible source. The sound is unmistakably human, carrying anguish that grips the observer with immediate unease. Shadows move across the walls, fluid and irregular. Observers report seeing shapes stretching and contracting, shifting without discernible source or rhythm. Sudden drafts sweep through the hollow. Cold air spirals across the feet and ankles of visitors, brushing unexpectedly against skin and clothing. The wind carries no origin from the open sea or cave mouth, yet it is persistent and focused, winding through the passages of stone and rock. Travelers often pause, momentarily disoriented, sensing the drafts as deliberate, almost sentient. The interplay between sound, shadow, and air creates an immersive atmosphere. Footsteps on stone echo unnaturally, even when few visitors are present. The screams seem layered, some higher, some lower, moving across the hollow in patterns that defy physical explanation. Observers report a rhythm that is intermittent yet purposeful, a cadence that raises awareness and heightens tension with each step. Objects occasionally shift within reach. Small stones slide across the cave floor. Seaweed drifts against walls without water movement. And debris shifts as though nudged by unseen hands. No force is visible, and yet movement occurs, contributing to the impression of the hollow as an active, conscious space. The effect is cumulative, amplifying the already heightened perception of the observers. Contributing to the impression of the observer's heightened perception. And amplifying the sense of dread, which is already heightened by the strange, unsettling occurrences. And the overall atmosphere of the cave. Which is already heightened by the strange, unsettling occurrences. And the overall atmosphere of the cave. Contributes to the overall sense of dread. And heightens the feeling of being watched, which is already present by the eerie, unsettling atmosphere. And the overall feeling of unease of the cave's interior, which is already intense by the strange, unsettling occurrences. And the overall atmosphere of the cave, which is already heightened by the strange, unsettling occurrences. And the overall atmosphere of the cave. Even when the water is calm, the hollow feels alive. The human-like screams continue, rippling across walls. And shadows stretch and twist independently of any light source. Visitors describe the sensation of being watched from multiple angles at once. Peripheral vision catches shapes that vanish upon direct attention. And the echoing sound seems synchronized with the movement of shadows, amplifying the sense of engagement from the environment. The cave structure magnifies these phenomena. Narrow passages, alcoves, and irregular surfaces create complex acoustics, reflecting and distorting sound. Low ceilings and jutting stone direct air currents into unpredictable paths. Observers describe a sense of enclosure, of being both contained and observed, while the hollow amplifies perception and response to even minor disturbances. The experience is not constant, but intermittent. Shadows appear suddenly, screams rise and fall, drafts sweep without warning. Patterns are unpredictable, creating heightened anticipation and vigilance. Visitors learn to move slowly, listening intently, observing closely, and measuring every step. The hollow enforces awareness, compelling travelers to exist fully within the space rather than merely pass through it. Attempts to record the phenomena with cameras or audio devices often fail. Video captures the stone, water, and debris, yet the shadows remain elusive. Audio devices pick up wind, water, and normal echoes but not the layered screams described by visitors. The experience exists in perception, unmeasurable by technology yet undeniable to those present. The cave exerts a lasting impression. Observers report that even after leaving, the sensation of being observed persists. Sounds and shadows echo in memory. The pressure of cold drafts, the human-like screams, and the movement of unseen objects linger, shaping thoughts and dreams. Visitors carry a vivid awareness that the hollow continues to exist in some form beyond their immediate presence. Darkwater Hollow continues to endure, sculpted by water, wind, and stone. Yet animated by perception and presence. Waves roll against the entrance, debris shifts with the tide. And screams echo from walls even when the cave is calm. Shadows twist and slide across stone surfaces. And drafts move with deliberate, untraceable paths. The space remains alive, immersive, and impossible to fully understand. Every journey into the hollow leaves a memory, a combination of sound, sensation, and perception that cannot be easily conveyed. Visitors feel the cave's presence pressing awareness, its responses timed with observation, and its phenomena persistent yet unpredictable. Darkwater Hollow exists as a threshold, a natural space transformed into something extraordinary, a place where human perception intersects with unexplainable forces, leaving all who enter changed long after departure. Riftstone Cove lies hidden along a jagged coastline, a cavern carved over centuries by relentless waves. Its mouth opens wide, inviting explorers into shadowed depths where sunlight barely reaches the floor. Inside, the cave splits into multiple chambers, each branching off into darkened passageways. The walls glisten with moisture, and the sound of dripping water echoes unevenly, creating an environment where space and perception feel distorted. Each chamber carries its own soundscape. Footsteps, if made, resonate differently depending on the size and shape of the room. Some areas amplify the smallest noise into a deep, rolling echo, while others absorb it entirely, leaving an unnatural silence. Visitors quickly learn that a single voice can sound multiplied, distorted, and distant all at once, making orientation difficult and heightening awareness of the cave's vast complexity. Screams emerge from chambers that cannot be entered. They rise sharply, echoing through the labyrinth of stone and shadow. Their source is invisible, and the sound carries a weight that feels deliberate. Shadows move independently of the visitor. Light from the entrance, or from a flashlight carried along the floor, catches angles and crevices, producing forms that stretch, twist, and shift without connection to any object. Peripheral vision often perceives motion along walls, in corners, or near the ceiling, creating the impression that the cave is populated by shapes that defy ordinary geometry. Sounds are layered, reflections multiply images, and air currents carry faint, untraceable whispers. Time behaves unpredictably inside Riftstone Cove. Walking through a single chamber may feel like hours, while exploring a narrow passage may pass in moments. Orientation becomes unreliable, and footsteps seem to echo ahead or behind, independent of the observer. The combination of irregular echoes, shifting shadows, and chambered spaces creates a sense of dislocation that persists as long as one remains inside. Visitors feel the presence of the cave itself. A subtle pressure follows each step. The air carries a weight that is tangible, brushing against skin and clothing, reinforcing the impression that Riftstone Cove is aware of movement. Echoes of sounds and shadows interact with perception, making each motion feel observed and recorded. Footsteps sometimes follow outside the cave. Even after leaving, travelers report hearing soft steps in rhythm with their own along wet sand or rocks. The noise fades and reappears unpredictably, often matching pace but seeming to originate from different directions. Creating a lingering tension, the sensation that the cave's reach extends beyond its stone walls. The chambers are deceptive in scale. Rooms appear larger or smaller than expected. Ceilings may rise abruptly, then narrow, creating optical distortions in combination with shadows and light. Pools of water reflect both ceiling and floor, producing layered illusions of depth. Visitors feel uncertain of distance, making navigation both challenging and immersive. Shadows interact with sound. Shapes respond to echoes, twisting or elongating in response to footsteps, drips, and distant cries. Peripheral vision dominates awareness, and repeated glances reveal subtle changes in form or position, reinforcing the sensation of being accompanied without direct visibility. The cave preserves history. Every scream, footstep, or sound contributes to the auditory memory of Riftstone Cove. Echoes combine and layer, creating continuity of presence across space and time. Visitors experience the accumulated awareness of past travelers, a resonance that intertwines with their own movement. Exploration requires careful attention. Each turn, chamber, and passage must be navigated slowly. Shadows, echoes, and irregular acoustics create an environment that demands mindfulness. The combination of visual distortion, sound manipulation, and the unseen shapes heightens both tension and curiosity, compelling focus while maintaining mystery. Exiting the cave provides partial relief. Light returns, echoes fade, and the irregularities of space and sound diminish. Yet the memory of motion, shadows, and unseen presence persists. Observers carry the sensation of attention, the echo of inaccessible chambers, and the subtle trace of footsteps that seem to follow beyond the cave mouth. Riftstone Cove endures as a threshold. It is ordinary in stone and water, extraordinary in perception. Multiple chambers, echoes, shadows, and whispers combine to create an immersive space, where reality and memory intertwine. Every visitor contributes to the ongoing presence within the cave, leaving with a lingering impression of sound, movement, and unseen observation. Leaving with a lingering impression of sound, movement, and unseen observation. The cove waits silently for the next explorer. Shadows twist, echoes shift, and whispers rise from inaccessible chambers. Steps trace and retrace paths, footsteps align and diverge. The weight of presence remains embedded in rock, water, and air. Riftstone Cove is a place where the physical, auditory, and perceptual converge, forming a continuous, immersive experience that stretches beyond the visible, leaving a mark on every journey through its stone-carved depths. Shivercliff Cave looms at the edge of jagged cliffs, its dark mouth framed by stone weathered by wind and waves. The ocean crashes below, white foam surging against rocks, carrying a rhythm that seems to synchronize with the cave itself. Approaching the entrance, visitors feel the weight of the cliff pressing down, an almost tangible pressure that settles on the chest and slows breath. The air is thick with salt, moisture, and an indefinable tension that grows with every step toward the opening. Inside, the cave swallows light. Shadows stretch along uneven walls, and the sound of waves is magnified, echoing unpredictably against stone surfaces. Screams are heard, rising and falling with intensity, appearing both from the cliffs above and from deep within the cave itself. They have no discernible source, yet resonate in every direction, creating the unsettling impression that the space is alive with both presence and memory. The floor is slick and uneven, covered in tidal debris and slick rock. Water drips from ceilings and pools in depressions, reflecting faint light and producing shimmering patterns that shift as visitors move. Footsteps echo across the stone in ways that do not align with movement, suggesting phantom presences pacing in tandem with or counter to the explorers. The effect is disorienting, producing a heightened awareness of every sound, shadow, and motion. Visitors report an acute sense of pressure inside the cave. The weight is physical and psychological, pressing on the chest and shoulders, making each step deliberate. Breathing becomes conscious, slow, measured. The sensation intensifies near the inner recesses, where echoes of screams blend with the rhythmic pulse of crashing waves, producing an oppressive atmosphere that is difficult to resist. Screams themselves appear layered. Some originate from the cliffs above, carried on gusts of wind and the echoing rocks. Others emanate from within, distant yet close, rising in tones of anguish and warning. The combination creates a sense that the cave is connected to its surrounding landscape, a conduit between rock, water, and unseen presence. Visitors feel enclosed and exposed simultaneously, aware of isolation and observation at once. Light behaves unpredictably. Sunlight or moonlight entering the cave. Reflects off wet surfaces, casting shifting shadows that appear to move independently of natural sources. Patterns of reflection produce shapes that suggest figures. Fleeting glimpses of motion that vanish when approached. The cave bends perception, creating a sense of depth and distance that is unreliable. Making the space feel larger, longer, and more labyrinthine than its physical dimensions suggest. Sound is amplified and distorted. Footsteps echo repeatedly, sometimes preceding or lagging behind movement. Drips from stalactites or tidal pools resonate across chambers, creating harmonics that blend with phantom footsteps and screams. Even silence carries weight, the absence of sound accentuating the auditory phenomena that dominate the cave environment. Explorers often describe dizziness and disorientation. The combined effect of pressure, echoing screams, shifting shadows, and uneven terrain produces a sensory overload that impacts balance and perception. Small movements feel exaggerated, and familiar landmarks appear unfamiliar. Each passage, each chamber, presents subtle variations that reinforce the impression of a living, reactive space. Water interacts with perception. Pools reflect distorted images, appearing deeper or shallower than reality. Waves intrude unpredictably, rising further into the cave than expected, wetting floors and leaving traces that seem to have been disturbed by unseen forces. Reflections of light on water produce illusions of figures, amplifying the sense that the cave is populated even when empty. Time is experienced differently within Shivercliff Cave. Moments stretch or compress unpredictably. Moments stretch or compress unpredictably. Footsteps repeat in echoes after departure, shadows linger longer than they should, and the rhythm of the waves seems to bend with perception. Footsteps repeat in echoes after departure, shadows linger longer than they should, and the rhythm of the waves seems to bend with perception. Visitors may move only a few feet while feeling they have traversed vast stretches. Visitors may move only a few feet while feeling they have traversed vast stretches. The cave imposes its own cadence, independent of ordinary measurement. The cave imposes its own cadence, independent of ordinary measurement. Attempts to record the phenomena often fail. Cameras produce blurred or distorted images. And audio equipment captures static, echoes, or low-frequency vibrations with no identifiable source. The cave appears resistant to documentation, preserving the integrity of its presence while leaving observers with direct experience as the only record. Those who linger report heightened awareness of unseen presences. Figures appear at the edges of vision, indistinct yet human in outline, moving along walls or through shadows. They vanish when approached but leave an impression, a lingering sense of observation that persists long after leaving. Even distant sounds from cliffs above or tidal surges below seem coordinated with activity inside the cave, reinforcing the sensation of an interconnected, alive environment. Visitors depart carrying the memory of the cave in body and mind. The screams echo in thought. The shadows linger in memory. And the weight felt in the chest persists. The crashing waves, the shifting reflections, and the presence of something beyond comprehension combine to create a haunting impression that endures far longer than the physical crossing. Shivercliff Cave remains, dark and imposing at the base of jagged cliffs. A space where sound, shadow, pressure, and perception converge. Screams rise from rock and stone. Waves pulse unpredictably. And explorers feel both observed and contained. The cave endures, alive in sensation, reaction, and memory. A space where ordinary rules bend and perception stretches, waiting for the next visitor to step into its shadowed, echoing depths. Moonlight falls across the water that pools just inside the hollow, illuminating shapes and reflections that seem alive in the dim glow. The air outside carries the scent of damp stone and earth, heavy with moisture from the nearby river. Moonshadow Hollow lies partially hidden beneath an overhanging rock formation, its entrance dark and narrow, inviting only those willing to step into shadow and uncertainty. Stepping inside, visitors immediately notice the stillness. The water is calm, yet it reflects more than light. Figures stand within the shallow pools, silhouetted by the moon. They are unmoving, tall, and dark, human in form yet impossibly still. Observation produces a strange tension. The figures remain silent, their presence unwavering, watching without acknowledgement or reaction. Their presence unwavering, watching without acknowledgement or reaction. Screams echo through the hollow, sudden and sharp, yet impossible to locate. The sound rises and falls unpredictably, alternating between high-pitched wails and low, guttural tones. It creates a sensation that the hollow itself is alive, communicating in a language of sound and space that defies explanation. The walls are uneven, jagged, and slick with moisture. Shadows cling to every crevice, stretching along surfaces as moonlight falls across the stone. Light interacts with water, producing reflections that shift subtly, creating shapes that are not there when looked at directly. Peripheral vision captures movement at the edges, fleeting forms that vanish when observed consciously. Explorers report sensations of presence beyond the figures in the water. A pressure along the shoulders, a faint brush of air, or a chill that rises suddenly across the back of the neck suggests awareness. There is no contact, yet the perception of being observed is persistent and insistent. Each movement through the hollow is measured, as the space itself seems to respond to human attention. Time behaves strangely within Moonshadow Hollow. Steps across the shallow pools feel longer than they should. Echoes of movement continue after footfalls cease. And distance appears altered. Returning to the entrance can seem impossible for brief moments. As corridors shift in perception, angles change subtly, and familiar markers appear to move. The hollow warps ordinary understanding of space and progression. Sound is unpredictable and layered. Footsteps echo in multiple directions, often ahead and behind simultaneously. The water produces faint ripples that reflect light, yet no movement is visible. The screams appear without cause, originating from spaces that cannot exist physically. Every auditory cue contributes to heightened tension and awareness, making exploration immersive and psychologically compelling. Figures in the water do not move toward observers, yet their presence is profoundly affecting. Reflections shift unnaturally, mirroring the moonlight in ways that exaggerate movement. Peripheral vision detects slight changes in posture or position, yet direct observation reveals nothing has changed. The figure's stillness combined with their unwavering attention produces an intense psychological effect that cannot be ignored. Moonlight plays a crucial role in perception. Beams filter through gaps in rock overhead, illuminating portions of water and walls while leaving other areas in deep shadow. The interplay between light and dark accentuates reflections, shapes, and figures, producing a constantly shifting visual environment. Shadows twist and lengthen unnaturally, creating a sense that the hollow itself is subtly alive. Explorers note that the hollow seems to respond to focus. Direct attention to a figure or a source of sound intensifies perception of its presence. Attempting to move quickly produces stronger echoes and a heightened sense of pull from the water. Moving cautiously reduces some intensity, yet the hollow never releases its influence entirely. Observation is interactive, subtle, and unavoidable. Chills travel along the spine, skin prickles along arms, and balance feels subtly altered on the wet floor. The water appears to exert a gentle pull, guiding attention toward deeper pools or toward figures in reflection. Motion within the hollow becomes deliberate, measured, and cautious as explorers navigate these invisible forces. Documentation is difficult. Cameras capture water, stone, and shadows, yet the figures and their subtle movement rarely appear clearly. Audio equipment records echoes, faint splashes, or ambient dripping, but the full range of screaming, reverberation, and presence experienced in person is absent. The hollow resists capture, preserving the intensity of experience for those physically present. The water does not harm, the figures remain still, and the walls remain stationary. The experience is immersive, psychological, and sensory. The hollow shapes perception and awareness, producing tension, disorientation, and fascination without direct threat. Despite the unsettling phenomena, Moonshadow Hollow is not overtly hostile. The water does not harm, the figures remain still, and the walls remain stationary. The experience is immersive, psychological, and sensory. Leaving the hollow produces lingering effects. Sounds, figures, and reflections persist in memory. As do the sensations of pressure, presence, and altered space. The hollow's influence extends into thought and perception long after departure. Moonshadow Hollow endures as a place where water, moonlight, shadow, and sound converge. Figures stand silently in the pools. Screams echo without source. And walls reflect space in impossible ways. Explorers move carefully, aware of unseen attention and subtle forces that shape perception. The hollow exists as an immersive environment, altering reality through light, sound, and presence. Leaving every visitor forever aware that this is a place both ancient and alive. Wailing Rock Cave lies hidden within a jagged hillside, its entrance framed by crumbling boulders and twisted roots. By daylight, it appears unremarkable, a dark hollow that beckons only the curious and the bold. Visitors enter expecting ordinary echoes, the faint drip of water, and the muted scent of damp stone. Yet from the first step inside, the cave reveals that it is far from ordinary. Moisture glistens along the rock faces, and faint streaks appear as though the stone weeps silently. The sound of trickling water merges with subtle vibrations in the walls, creating a resonance that feels deliberate. Visitors describe a sensation that the stone is alive, expressing presence through sound and motion, whispering in a language beyond comprehension. Scratching sounds echo along the rocks. They move unpredictably, rising and falling in volume, sometimes close, sometimes distant. The noise is deliberate, scraping along surfaces without visible origin. Explorers pause, straining to locate the source, but nothing appears. The scraping persists, traveling across walls and ceilings. Figures appear and vanish instantly. Shadowy shapes dart along corridors, moving faster than human reaction allows. Approaching them reveals only empty passageways. The figures are indistinct yet humanoid, moving with intent and speed that defy understanding. Appearing and disappearing as though the cave controls their existence. The cave amplifies sound unnaturally. Every footstep produces multiple echoes, some ahead of movement, others behind. Whispers and scraping combine into a layered chorus, creating disorientation. The cries of unseen entities seem to rise and fall in unison, blending into the ambient noise of dripping water and shifting stone, making it impossible to discern direction or distance. Cold air presses against skin and clothing without wind or draft. Pockets of chill appear and vanish, moving through rooms and corridors as though guided. Explorers report feeling a brush along arms and neck, subtle yet real, heightening the impression that the cave is attentive and interactive. Shadows move independently of light. Beams from headlamps create shapes that stretch and shift unnaturally. Figures appear behind corners, along walls, and across passageways. When directly observed, they vanish, only to reappear moments later in another location. The interplay of light and shadow makes spatial perception unreliable, corridors stretching longer, ceilings higher, and chambers deeper than expected. Sounds seem to come from within the mind as well as the cave. Visitors sometimes perceive screams, whispers, and scratching as though originating internally. The effect is disorienting, blending external and internal perception. Time becomes unreliable. Minutes stretch and collapse unpredictably. Steps across the cave feel longer than measured distances. The echoes, scratching, and fleeting figures create a rhythm. Light from headlamps flickers inconsistently. Shadows lengthen or disappear suddenly. Awareness of passage is distorted. Attempts to record phenomena yield inconsistent results. Cameras capture walls, floor, and pools of water, but the rapid figures rarely appear. Audio devices register echoes, low hums, and occasional scratching, but screams and internalized sounds are not clearly recorded. Temperature and motion sensors fluctuate unpredictably, confirming visitor reports yet offering no mechanical explanation. Repeated visits reveal consistent patterns. Explorers note the same behaviors: walls that seem to cry, scratching along surfaces, figures moving impossibly fast, and echoes that merge with perception. Each encounter reinforces the impression that Wailing Rock Cave retains awareness, responding subtly to presence and attention. Some visitors leave visibly shaken. They report chills, fleeting touches, and a lingering impression of being observed. Sounds echo in memory long after leaving. Shadows reappear in dreams. The cave's presence endures beyond physical exploration, leaving psychological and perceptual traces that persist for hours or days. The cave appears ordinary in daylight. Sunlight reaches the entrance, illuminating walls, stone, and pools. Footsteps sound normal, echoes behave predictably, and the rapid figures are absent. Yet the memory of night exploration remains vivid, hinting that the cave possesses an internal awareness only active under low light or extended presence. Blackened walls, shifting shadows, and layered echoes create a threshold. Visitors experience space beyond ordinary perception, a place where attention and awareness become tangible. The cave is both physical and perceptual, ordinary in measurement but extraordinary in effect. Wailing Rock Cave endures as both structure and presence. Its stone walls, pools of water, and chambers are tangible, yet alive with unseen observers, impossible figures, and disorienting sound. Visitors emerge altered, carrying vivid impressions of cries, scratching, and fleeting shadows. The cave exists simultaneously as a natural formation and as an experience, a space where perception, sound, and presence converge, leaving memory haunted and awareness heightened long after the journey ends. Stormfall Cove lies along a jagged coastline, its entrance carved into cliffs that rise sharply from the turbulent sea. By day, it appears as a dark hollow, ordinary in shape and silent except for the crash of waves below. By night, and especially during storms, the cove transforms. Wind, rain, and lightning converge, creating an environment alive with sound, light, and presence. Visitors often report that storms seem drawn to this location. Clouds thicken above, winds intensify, and rain lashes the cliffs as though the weather itself responds to the cove. Lightning illuminates the rock faces and the interior of the cave, brief and brilliant, revealing shapes and movement that vanish as soon as the flash fades. The illumination casts shadows that twist across walls, creating the impression of motion where none should exist. Faces appear along the cliffs and within the cave during lightning flashes. Observers describe them as screaming, their features contorted in anguish or fear. They vanish immediately between flashes, leaving only the walls and rock. The images are vivid, as though etched into the stone for a moment, impossible to ignore yet impossible to capture or approach. Witnesses describe a chilling sensation that the faces are aware of their observation, locking eyes with those who glimpse them. Inside the cave, the environment is oppressive. The air is thick with the scent of wet stone and salt. Rain funnels into the entrance, pooling on uneven floors. The wind whistles through cracks and fissures, creating echoes that amplify every sound. Travelers report disorientation, a sense that the walls have shifted, and that the exit is no longer in the place expected. Stormfall Cove exerts control over perception. Explorers attempting to leave during storms often find the paths indistinct, blocked, or transformed by shadows and reflections. Lightning flashes reveal the cave in fragments, portions of walls or passageways that vanish between bursts of light. The disorientation grows with each attempt to move forward, making the journey out a careful, deliberate navigation that tests both courage and attention. The faces within the cave and along the cliffs are not static. They appear in different locations with each flash, sometimes closer, sometimes farther. Always screaming silently between moments of illumination. Observers report a compounding effect. The longer they remain, the more intense the fear and awareness become. The cave and cliff seem to respond to presence, focusing attention and amplifying perception. Sounds within the cave complement the visual phenomena. Whispers over the storm, unintelligible yet urgent, layered over the crash of surf. Footsteps not belonging to any visitor echo in hallways and alcoves, reinforcing the sense of multiple presences. The combination of visual and auditory cues immerses visitors completely in the experience. The cove alters awareness of time and space. A few minutes inside can feel like hours. Lightning reveals portions of the cave that seem further than they are. Shadows create depth beyond the physical structure. Sound reverberates in unpredictable patterns. Visitors describe a feeling of being observed from multiple angles. As though the storm, the cave, and the cliffs are aware of their movement and attention. Attempts to document the phenomena often fail. Cameras capture the cave, the walls, and occasional lightning. Yet the faces vanish between frames. Audio devices record wind, rain, and thunder. But not the whispers or footsteps reported by visitors. The experience exists primarily in perception. Vivid and undeniable to those present, yet impervious to technological capture. Visitors leave the cave transformed by the experience. The combination of screaming faces, unpredictable light, sound, and movement creates a memory. A memory that is persistent and immersive. Even after storms pass and the air clears. Explorers carry the impression of the cove with them. The sense of being watched, and the knowledge that the space continues to exist beyond ordinary understanding. Stormfall Cove endures, shaped by centuries of wind, rain, and rock, yet animated by phenomena that cannot be explained. Lightning continues to illuminate faces and shadows, storms continue to gather, and the cave continues to alter perception. Travelers passing through experience a space that is alive, immersive, and unforgettable, where the natural and the uncanny intersect. Leaving all who enter with a vivid memory of screaming faces, moving shadows, and the relentless, watching storm. The cove remains both a physical passage and a threshold into something extraordinary. The cliffs rise sharply, the cave swallows light and sound. And storms intensify the experience. Lightning flashes reveal and obscure. Waves crash unpredictably, and the screaming faces endure. Stormfall Cove exists simultaneously as a landscape of stone and weather and as a place where perception, presence, and fear converge. Shaping every visitor who enters its shadowed mouth. Phantom Tide Cave rests at the edge of a jagged cliff, where waves crash violently against rocks and the wind carries the scent of salt and brine. The entrance is wide and dark, framed by stone worn smooth by centuries of water and wind. The air is heavy and damp, carrying a chill that penetrates clothing and skin. Visitors approaching feel the weight of the place before setting foot on the uneven, wet stones leading inside. Screams echo across the water. They rise sharply and fade into the roar of the waves, carried far along the cliff and the ocean beyond. The sound is human yet distorted, resonating in unpredictable rhythms with the wind and surf. Shadowy figures emerge from the waves. They rise slowly, motionless, standing just beyond the surf. Their outlines are dark and indistinct, yet unmistakable. Observers report feeling eyes upon them, a presence that watches every step and hesitation. The water itself is restless. Waves break in uneven patterns, moving against expectation, rising and falling in coordination with the cries and shadows. Foam reflects the moonlight in fractured streaks, and the surface shimmers as if alive, responding subtly to movement along the shore or within the cave. Even when calm, the water carries an unsettling energy, as though it remembers every crossing, every visitor, and every whispered sound. Shadows shift independently of light. Reflections on wet stone and shallow pools create forms that twist and stretch, bending along cracks in the rock. Shapes appear to detach briefly from surfaces, hovering just beyond peripheral vision. A glance directly often reveals nothing, but shadows remain at the edges, moving with subtle synchronization to the observer's motion. The cave amplifies sound and perception. Footsteps echo unnaturally across uneven stone. Water droplets strike surfaces in rhythmic patterns, blending with wind and surf to create layered auditory experiences. Whispers float on the air, faint but insistent, indistinguishable in words yet unmistakable in tone. The combination produces tension, compelling heightened awareness of every motion, every sound, every shadow. Time becomes distorted within the cave and along the cliff. A short exploration feels extended, moments linger beyond measure, and perception of distance warps. The crashing waves, echoing screams, and rising shadows interact to disorient visitors. The figures in the water maintain perfect observation. They align with movement along the shore or inside the cave, rising in sync with approach. Their forms remain motionless yet responsive, appearing closer or further depending on perspective. Peripheral vision catches subtle shifts in shape and density, producing the sensation that the water itself is alive with memory and awareness. Wind carries subtle messages. Whispers drift with the gusts, brushing across ears and shoulders. The tone is deliberate, alternating between urgent and commanding. Observers feel the air pressing gently yet insistently, guiding attention along pathways, to shadows, and toward the water. The wind merges with natural sound to create a continuous sensory experience. The cliff and cave preserve memory. Every scream, wave, and shadow contributes to an ongoing presence. Observers sense layers of past visitors embedded in stone and water. The cave appears to respond to movement, reacting subtly to footsteps, adjusting perception through echoes and reflections. Even after leaving, the cave continues its influence. Steps along the path feel heavier, shadows along the cliff line linger. And the memory of watching figures remains. The wind seems to carry fragments of whispers across distance. Waves echo faintly against rocks, and the air retains its chill. Visitors leave with a heightened sense of awareness, the impression that observation continues beyond sight and hearing. Phantom Tide Cave endures as a threshold. It is ordinary in rock and water, extraordinary in effect. The cave, the cliff, the surf, and the rising shadows combine to create an environment where perception is layered and memory persists. Screams, reflections, and whispers interact with every visitor, shaping experience, and leaving lasting impressions that extend beyond the physical space. The cave waits silently for the next visitor. Shadowed figures rise from the surf, motionless and observant. Waves continue to break against the cliff, and echoes ripple through stone and water. Whispers drift faintly on the wind, and reflections glimmer on wet rock. Phantom Tide Cave is a space where ordinary exploration intersects with perception and memory, where every crossing becomes part of its enduring presence, and where the ocean, stone, and shadow collaborate in quiet vigilance. Thank you for exploring these haunted coastal caves with me tonight. The waves remember every scream. The cliffs remember every shadow. And the caves remember the visitors who dared to enter. Some explorers leave terrified. Some vanish entirely. And some carry the screams home, echoing in their dreams forever. If you ever find yourself walking along a coastline at night, and the wind carries a distant scream, stop, listen, and watch carefully. The shadows may be following more than just your footsteps. Would you dare enter one of these caves, or would you retreat while the screams are still far behind? Rest well, my friend. Until our next journey into the dark unknown.